Hey everybody, I'm Renocio, and we've finally gotten a break from all the snow and the rain and the generally gross weather that we tend to have in springtime, and we finally got some sun here in Halifax. Bea and I went for a walk this morning to kind of break up the COVID quarantine restlessness, and I decided I'd use this morning to draw some springtimey things. Because of the latitude that Nova Scotia is at, we get our end of springtime way later than most other people. A couple years ago, we actually had a frost at the end of June, so usually when everyone else on my social media is talking about all the pretty flowers in bloom and all the warm weather and the green grass, it's still snowing and gross over here and gray and cloudy, and it just really gets me down. So I decided I'd take advantage of this nice day to draw something very springy, something bright and colorful. And okay, you know how watercolor artists have this thing about drawing really pretty girls, usually with long flowing hair and these wistful expressions, and surrounding them with flowers and things like that? I was watching an artist the other day who was doing this sort of thing, and it was beautiful, but I was thinking, if I'm gonna do that, I don't want to draw a pretty girl. Like, don't get me wrong, I love drawing pretty girls, but I want to do something different. So I decided I was going to draw a pretty boy, and I was going to draw a big, chubby pretty boy, because I like me some squish. This is actually one of those rare times that I'm going into a drawing without the intention of drawing fan art. I've always been a fan artist. It's much more interesting to me to work with characters that are already established. I went through a few phases of making my own characters, but generally speaking, it's less interesting to me. This time around, though, I had a distinct image of the kind of boy that I wanted to draw, and so I was a little more inspired to give something original a try. So I'm doing the basis of this drawing with watercolor pencils, not because I intend to use them to create the actual color of the drawing, so much as I just want a line art that isn't super heavy like an ink pen would be. Like all those other artists that I saw doing the pretty girls, I wanted to give this guy really flowy, sort of wavy, curly hair, something that looked very soft and dreamlike, but I didn't want to make it super long, and I wanted to give him a beard for sure. I also find body hair very charming, so he's a fluffy boy kind of all over. I'm still learning how to draw fatter body types, how to make it look heavy and dense and to have that really soft looking roundness that it does in real life. I've mentioned before, but I'm very new to drawing body types that aren't just a generic, plain, boring anime body sort of thing. So figuring out how the weight distribution works and making it look like something with mass is definitely something I'm still working at. Another thing I've never drawn a lot of is plants, especially trees. So trying to figure out how cherry trees would look was a bit of a challenge. I'm really bad at looking at reference photos, so I'm doing these still by memory based on another watercolor artist's drawing of sakura trees. So they're probably still not entirely correct. I decided to take a different approach with the watercolors this time too, especially with shading the skin. I'm still very new to watercolors, and I think I've been using them like I would any other medium, and my exposure to many other mediums is limited. I've done some digital art, I've done some coloring with colored pencils, and watercolor is different both in the way that it behaves and the things you can do with it. My instinct has always been to just color the whole thing with a base light color and then work the shadows up, but I've seen a couple different examples now of people using the watercolor just for the shading and letting the white space sort of imply all the lightness. So in order to keep this image bright and airy and super pastel-y, I decided to only use a super light color on the shady parts of the skin and then leave the white spaces to imply more brightness. I'm also drawing this in the back of what I would say is a mixed media sketchbook, but it's really just, I don't know, a sketchbook made of paper that I didn't hate the feel of. I choose my sketchbooks based on whether or not they make my fingers uncomfortable when I touch on them. So I have no idea what kind of paper this is, but I know it's not super thick, and I know it's definitely not the biggest fan of watercolors. I can do watercolors on them as long as I have the paper taped down and I'm going very easy on the water. There's no, or at least not a lot of wet on wet technique going on here. Things seem to go all right. I used a pretty limited palette for this drawing as well. I think I just kind of had the peachy color for the skin tone, some sort of a light brown for the hair and some of the shading, the blue for the background a little bit, and then a red and a couple of watered down reds or slightly purpley reds for all of the cherry blossoms. Once I had all the base colors down, I went over everything with a darker line art, but I really was still just using the watercolor pencils. Instead of just the pink and the slightly darker pink that I used to make the sketch, I used a red and a slightly darker brown for most of the line art the second round. I figured this way it would still be soft, it would still be unobtrusive, but it would give things a little more of a definition. While I was going along, I actually used the watercolor pencils for a bit of shading as well, and then I didn't add any water to them to blend them out. They're just pencil, sort of gritty texture over top of the watercolors, which I think gave everything a little more depth, a little more interest to look at. And in the end, I used some white gel pen to give it some little bit of sparkly. I know it's not technically working in this image, but trust me, I made it work. And finally, when everything was dry, I pulled off the washi tape and I ended up giving it a sealing coat with a matte spray sealant. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I hope you're all staying safe and being easy on yourself during this super weird time. And if you liked what you see here, feel free to hit the subscribe button so we can catch each other again. Take care, guys. Later.